Okay, now we're going to start chapter 8 and we're going to talk about markups based on cost and markups based on selling price. And we're going to use the same procedure we used when we did percent, increase, and decrease. We're going to use that same procedure. So honestly, we're not really learning anything new other than some new terminology. What we have to really pay attention to when we're reading the problem, because this is going to affect the outcome of the problem. If the problem says the markup is based on cost, then in the problem, the base, when we look at the circle, portion, base, and rate, the base will be the cost. If the problem says the markup is based on selling price, then in those problems, the base is going to be the selling price when we look at the PBR circle. So for markups based on cost, the base is the cost. And when it says the markup is based on selling price, the base is going to be the selling price. Okay, so in the first example, it says Jill Sport, owner of Sports Company, sells tennis rackets for $50. To make her desired profit, Jill needs to mark up 40% on cost. What does the tennis rackets cost Jill? So basically, when you have a company, you have a cost, and then you have to raise the price when you sell it so that you can make a profit. So the cost is what the cost the company or the person, and then the selling price is what the buyer purchases the product for. So our formula for these is going to be the cost plus the dollar markup. I'm going to initial it DM for dollar markup, will give us the selling price. This is virtually the same thing as the old value plus the amount of the change will give us the new value, which is what we did in chapter 6. It's virtually the same thing. We're just using different terminology. The amount that it costs the person to purchase the materials or the product, plus they mark it up a certain dollar amount, and then they sell it at a price so that they can make a profit. So just know that the DM stands for dollar markup and the SP stands for selling price. And we're going to make a chart just like we did before. The only difference with these problems and the problems that we did in chapter 6 with the percent increase and decrease is that we have to now pay attention to the wording so we can determine what the base is. Because depending on if the markup is based on cost or if the markup is based on selling price, that will tell us what we should make the base in the problem. Okay, now if I read through the problem, it says the markup is based on cost, which means the cost, which is this first column here, is going to be my base, which is the 100%. And then we're going to fill in all the other information that's given to us. The tennis racket sells for $50. So that's $50 represents the selling price. So I'm going to put that here. And what we need to do is we need to figure out the amount that it costs Jill. So we need to figure out the cost here. And since the percent for the change is 40%, I'm going to put the 40% underneath the dollar markup because that's the amount that it's changing or increasing by, which means since this says the cost plus the dollar markup is selling price, I'm going to do 100 plus 40 to get 140% here. Now, we always use the column with our base, since 100% is with the cost, and this is our base. And we want to make sure that we only have one unknown. So I'm going to use this other column here. I can't use the column for dollar markup because then I would have two question marks. I don't know what the dollar markup amount is. So I'm going to use the SP column. And I'm going to put that all in my circle. The amount of my base always goes in this bottom left corner. We don't know what that is. That's what we're looking for. So I'll just label that C for cost. And then the other information that we have is the $50. And then we have the rate, which always goes in this bottom right corner, is 140%. But I want to make sure I put it in as a decimal. So it's going to be 1.40. So to figure out what the cost is, since we're separating the two values that I know is the division line, I'm going to divide. So when I take 50 and divide by 140, that's going to give me $35.71. So this is the cost. So it costs Jill to purchase the tennis rackets $35.71. Then she marks it up 40% and she sells it for $50 so she can make a profit. Now the question also asks us, what's the dollar markup? Well, to find the dollar markup, we just need to find what would I add to $35.71 to get $50. So I'm just going to work backwards and subtract. So the dollar markup is going to be $14.29 because I take the difference between the $50 and the $35.71. Okay, the next example says the cost to Gap for a hooded fleece jacket is $18. The store plans to sell the jacket for $23. What is the Gap's dollar markup and what is the percent markup on selling price? Okay, so some information here. We want to figure out, so the keywords here is the markup is on selling price. So this means when I create my chart, my base is going to be the selling price. So I'm going to have the cost plus the dollar markup is going to give us the selling price. I always put the amount and the percent columns in. Now because it says the markup is on selling price, this is where I'm going to put my 100% is in the selling price column because this is going to be my base. Now it tells us also that the cost to Gap is $18, so that's the amount of the cost. It also tells us that they're going to sell it for $23. Now I can find the dollar markup very easily because I know that 18 plus the dollar markup would give me 23. So if I just subtract to work backwards and figure it out, I know I'm going to have a dollar markup of $5. So the question is asking, what is the markup on selling price? So we need to figure out what that percent increase is. So we always use the column with the base. So in this case, it's going to be this. Since we're looking for the percent markup, we're going to use the column for the dollar markup. And I'm going to put this all in my circle. So I always put the amount of the base down in this lower left corner. So that's going to be $23. And then I'm going to put $5 up here, and the rate of the increase, that's what we're looking for. So since what's separating the two values that I know is the division line, to find the percent markup, I'm going to take 5 divided by 23, and because this is a percent, I need to remember to multiply by 100 to change it to percent. Let's see. So I'm going to take 5 divided by 23 times 100. On my calculator, that's going to give me 21.74%. Okay, example C, it says Suki Komar bought dolls for her store for the cost of $14 each. To make her desired profit, Suki must mark up each doll 38% on cost. What is the dollar markup and what is the selling price? So we have two things to find here. Notice that the percent markup is on cost, which means when we fill out our chart, cost is going to be the base. So we have the cost plus the dollar markup is going to give us the selling price. Okay, so it says it costs her $14 each. Since cost is the base, I'm going to put 100% here. And she wants to mark it up 38%. So that's going to go here, which means the selling price is going to be 138% of the original cost. So, since we're looking for the dollar markup and the selling price, there's multiple ways you can do this, but because the cost is the base here, I'm always going to use the cost. Since we're looking for both of these, I'm just going to pick one. It doesn't matter which one, because I have to do both of them. I'm going to start with dollar markup first. So to find the dollar markup, the amount of the base always goes in this bottom left corner, so I'm going to put $14 here. Now remember, I'm putting 14 there because right now, since the markup is based on cost, our cost is the base. The amount of the markup is 38%, so as a decimal, that would be 0.38, and what we're looking for is the dollar markup. So the dollar markup is going to be whatever I get when I take 14 times 0.38, because what's separating the two values that we know is the multiplication line. So when I take 14 times 38, I'm going to get $5.32. So I know my dollar markup is $5.32. So it costs Suki $14. She marks it up $5.32. So there's two ways we can find the selling price. We can find the selling price by making another circle and solving for the selling price, or we can just take 14 and add $5.32. Either way, we're going to get the same answer. Let's check. So if I solve for the selling price, I'm going to put my base down here in the bottom left corner. Since I'm solving for my selling price, I'm going to put 138% for the rate, but I want to make sure I put it as a decimal, so it's 1.38, and I'm just going to solve for selling price. So selling price is going to be whatever I get when I take 14 times 1.38. When I take 14 times 1.38, I get 1932, which is the same if I took 14, my cost, added my dollar markup, I would still get 1932. So I can get the selling price either one of those ways. It doesn't matter. It just is up to you what your preference is in this case. Okay, last example for markups on cost and selling price. It says Mel's Furniture bought a lamp that cost $100. To make Mel's desired profit, he needs a 65% markup on selling price. What are Mel's selling price and his dollar markup? So it says he's going to do a markup on selling price, which means our base is going to be the selling price. So I have the cost plus the dollar markup is going to give me the selling price. Okay, now it says the amount of the markup in terms of percent is going to be 65%. It cost Mel $100. Since the markup is on selling price is going to be our base. So I'm going to put 100% here, which is our base. Now, I need to figure out what goes in this box. I know if I add a number plus 65, I should get 100 because of the way our equation is set up. So in order to add something to 65 to get 100, this is going to have to be 35%. So we need to find the selling price in the dollar markup. Well, I definitely have to use this column because that's my base. And then I don't want to go ahead and use the dollar markup yet because that would give us two unknowns. So I'm going to use the cost column to put my information into the circle. My base always goes in the left bottom corner. And since we don't know the amount of our base right now, which is what we're looking for, which is the selling price, I'm just going to label it SP. Since we're using the cost column, I'm going to put 100 and 0.35 in here. So to find the selling price, I'm going to take 100 and divide by 0.35 because what's separating the two values we know is the division line. So if I take 100 and I divide by 0.35, that's going to give me $285.71. So this is the selling price. So if I take $100 and I add some dollar markup, I'm going to get the selling price, which is $285.71. So again, I can solve this two different ways. Now that I know what the selling price is, I can either use a circle again with the DM column and the SP column, or I could figure it out without the circle because I know the cost plus the dollar markup is going to give me the selling price. If the cost is 100, I need to figure out what I would add to get 285.71. Well, the dollar markup, if we use this method, must be $185.71. If we use the circle method, you should still get the same answer. You're just going about it in a different way. To sum up, when you're doing the markups on selling price or the markup on cost, you still want to look at it as a percent change. So you're going to make your chart and make your circle. You just want to really pay attention to what you're marking it up on. Is it based on cost or is it based on selling price? And depending on what the problem says, if it says it's based on selling price, you want to make sure that your selling price is the 100% and that's your base. The other thing is, if it says markup is based on cost, then you want to make the cost your base and make that 100%. Other than that, this is the same thing as a percent change problem.